Salt, a common element in our lives, carries a profound and multifaceted spiritual significance. Since ancient times, it has been more than just a seasoning. In sacred scriptures and many religious traditions, salt is seen as a symbol of purification, preservation, and even as a powerful weapon in spiritual warfare. Jesus, in one of his most well-known sermons, declared, "You are the salt of the earth." This statement calls us to a deeper understanding of what it means to be the salt of the earth, and how we can use this element to fulfill God's will in our lives. To understand the true power of salt, we must first recognize that everything was created by God with a divine purpose. Nothing exists without God's will, and this includes salt. Share in the comments how you have used salt in your spiritual life, and inspire others with your testimony. Many people underestimate the spiritual value of salt, but when consecrated and used according to God's will, can become a powerful tool to break curses, bring healing, and offer protection. Salt, in its simplicity, reflects the purity and holiness of the Creator. Jesus did not choose the words "salt of the earth" by chance. Salt, in addition to preserving and flavoring food, symbolizes the preservation of faith and resistance against the corruption of the world. When we use salt in our spiritual practices, we are reaffirming our covenant with God and declaring our unwavering faith. Have you ever consecrated salt to use in your prayers and rituals? If not, now is the time to start. By using salt with faith and obedience, you are utilizing a divine inheritance that has the power to transform your life, protect your family against the forces of evil. Throughout the Bible, we find several references to salt, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. One of the most well-known passages is the story of Lot's wife, who was turned into a pillar of salt as a result of her disobedience. This event is a powerful reminder that salt is not just a symbol of blessing, it can also be an instrument of divine judgment and justice. Reflect on the significance of salt in your spiritual life and share your experience in the comment. This is an example of how salt can have multiple meanings, depending on how it is used and in what context. In the book of Leviticus, God commands that every sacrifice be seasoned with salt. This symbolizes the perpetual covenant between God and his people. Salt, with its preservative properties, represents the durability and fidelity of this covenant. Have you ever considered salt as a symbol of your covenant with God? When we use salt in our spiritual practices, we are reaffirming our connection with the Creator and our dedication to living according to his commandments. Salt, therefore, is not just a physical element, but a representation of eternity and God's faithfulness to his people. In the New Testament, Jesus uses salt as a metaphor to describe the influence Christians should have in the world. In Matthew 5 verse 13, he says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." This passage highlights our responsibility as followers of Christ to preserve truth and justice in a corrupt world. How are you being the salt of the earth in your daily life? This is a call to live in a way that reflects God's holiness and purity, using the tools he has given us to fight evil and promote good. Salt has been used for millennia as an agent of purification. In the Bible, it is frequently mentioned in purification rituals and sacrifices. In the book of Leviticus, God instructs the Israelites to use salt in all their offerings, symbolizing the need to purify the offerings before presenting them to the Lord. Have you used salt to purify your home or protect your family? Not? Consider starting today. The use of consecrated salt can bring peace and protection to your home, warding off evil forces and purifying the environment. In addition to purifying, salt is also seen as a symbol of protection. In many cultures, salt is sprinkled around properties or residences to create a spiritual barrier against evil spirits. This practice has its roots in the belief that salt, as a symbol of incorruptibility, can repel evil forces. Share how you've used salt to protect your home and inspire others to do the same. When we use salt with faith and devotion, we are declaring that our home and our lives are under God's protection. It is important to remember that the power of salt does not reside in the element itself, but in the faith and obedience of the person using it. Do you believe in the power of salt as a spiritual tool? If so, Start incorporating it into your spiritual practices now. By consecrating the salt to the Lord and using it with faith, you are utilizing a powerful tool that God has made available to you. Whether to purify, protect, or strengthen your faith, salt can be an essential part of your spiritual life. Do not underestimate the power of such a simple element, one that is filled with meaning and divine purpose. In times of spiritual warfare, salt can be a powerful weapon. The Bible shows us that salt was used both to bless and to curse. In Deuteronomy 29 verse 23, we read about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where salt is mentioned as a symbol of cursing, making the land barren and desolate. This passage reminds us that salt, when used against God's enemies, can be a weapon of destruction. Are you prepared to use salt as a spiritual weapon in your life? In times of trial, salt can be used to protect, purify, and even repel evil forces. The concept of spiritual warfare is often misunderstood. The Bible is clear in stating that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. In Ephesians 6:12, we are instructed to put on the full armor of God, and salt can be an important part of that armor. Have you consecrated salt to use in your spiritual battles? If not, now is the time to start. Salt, when consecrated and used with faith, can be a powerful tool to repel evil and protect what is sacred. Remember that salt should not be used frivolously or superstitiously. It is a powerful tool that must be used with reverence and faith. Share in the comments how you have used salt in your spiritual battles and inspire others to do the same. Spiritual warfare is real, and God has given us the necessary tools to win it. Salt is one of those tools, and when used correctly, it can bring great victories in your spiritual life. Throughout history, salt has been an integral part of many Christian traditions. Since the early days of the church, salt was used in baptismal and exorcism ceremonies, symbolizing purification and the expulsion of evil. Have you ever participated in a ceremony where salt was used? These ancient traditions remind us that salt is more than just a seasoning. It is a powerful symbol of faith and purification. In the Middle Ages, salt was also used to seal agreements and covenants, both in religious and secular context. The practice of sharing a meal with salt was seen as an act of fidelity and mutual trust. Have you ever considered the symbolism of salt in your relationships and commitments? Just as in Christian tradition, salt can be a symbol of your covenant with God and with those around you. By using salt in your spiritual practices, you are reaffirming your fidelity to God and to your community. Today, many Christians still use salt in their daily prayer and devotion practice. Whether to purify an environment, protect against evil, or reaffirm their faith, salt continues to be a vital part of spiritual life. How do you use salt in your daily spiritual practice? Share your experiences and inspire others to rediscover the power of salt in their lives. Salt, in its simplicity, continues to be a powerful symbol of the covenant between God and His people. Heritage we must cherish and use wisely. While salt is often associated with spiritual properties, it also possesses physical qualities that complement its spiritual use. Salt is a natural preservative, capable of preventing decay and prolonging the shelf life of food. This physical characteristic of salt reflects its spiritual role of preserving faith and protecting against corruption. Have you ever reflected on how the physical properties of salt can symbolize its spiritual strength? Just as salt preserves food, it can preserve and strengthen your faith in times of trial. In addition to being a preservative, salt also has healing properties. In various cultures, salt is used to clean wounds and promote healing. In the Bible, salt is mentioned in contexts of purification and healing, such as in the story of the prophet Elisha, who purified the waters of Jericho with salt. Have you used salt to promote healing in your spiritual life? If not, consider how salt can be a powerful tool to cleanse and heal spiritual wounds, helping you reconnect with God and your faith. Science also tells us that salt is essential for life, regulating fluid balance in the body and supporting nerve function. Similarly, spiritual salt is essential for spiritual life, helping to maintain the balance and vitality of faith. Do you recognize the importance of salt in your spiritual life? If so, continue to use it with faith and purpose, knowing that each grain of salt represents God's presence in your life, bringing balance, healing, and preservation. For salt to be effective in your spiritual practices, it is important that it be consecrated. Consecration of salt is an act of dedicating the salt to God, asking for His blessing and protection over it. Have you ever consecrated salt for spiritual use? If not, here is a simple guide to get started. First, choose a new, clean container to store the salt. Then, pray, asking God to bless the salt and use it as a tool for His glory. Finally, use the consecrated salt in your prayers, rituals, and protection practices. When using consecrated salt, it is important to remember that it should be used with faith and reverence. Salt is not a talisman or magical amulet. It is a spiritual tool that must be used in obedience to God. Are you using salt with the proper reverence? When you use salt, do so with the awareness that it is a physical representation of your faith and a symbol of your covenant with God. Use it to purify your home, protect your family, and strengthen your faith. Share in the comments how you consecrate and use salt in your spiritual life. Your experiences can inspire others to do the same and rediscover the power of salt. Remember that salt, in its simplicity, is a powerful tool that God has given us to strengthen our faith and protect against evil. Use it with wisdom and reverence, and you will see God's blessings manifest in your life. Over the centuries, many Christians have witnessed miracles and blessings by using salt in their spiritual practices. Have you experienced a miracle through the use of consecrated salt? If so, share your testimony in the comments. Many have seen powerful changes in their lives by using salt with faith, from healing illnesses, protection against spiritual attacks. A powerful example is the testimony of a sister who, upon anointing her hands with consecrated salt, saw a significant change in her financial life. She went from a situation of scarcity to one of abundance, recognizing that the use of salt with faith was instrumental in this transformation. Are you ready to experience similar miracles in your life? If so, start today by using salt in your spiritual practices, knowing that God can work in powerful ways through His creation. Remember that miracles do not come from the salt itself, but from the faith and obedience in using the tools that God has given us. Incorporate the use of salt into your prayers and rituals, and be prepared to see God's hand in your life. The power of salt is only a reflection of God's power, and when used with faith, can bring healing, protection, and abundant blessing. Share this knowledge with others and help spread the truth about the spiritual power of salt. Together, we can strengthen our faith and our community, trusting in God's promises and using the tools He has given us to achieve spiritual victories. The use of salt in Christian traditions and rituals is a practice that dates back to the early days of the Church. In many baptismal rituals, for example, salt is used as a symbol of purification, representing the spiritual cleansing of the individual before being admitted into the Christian community. Have you ever participated in a baptism where salt was used? These practices remind us that salt is more than a physical element. It is a symbol of our spiritual journey and our dedication to God. Another traditional use of salt is in exorcism ritual. In many Christian traditions, consecrated salt is sprinkled around an area or used in conjunction with prayers to expel evil spirits. This practice is rooted in the belief that salt, as a symbol of incorruptibility, has the power to repel evil and protect what is sacred. Have you ever used salt in a protection or exorcism ritual? If so, share your experience and inspire others to do the same. In everyday life, many Christians still use salt in simple practices of prayer and devotion. Whether to purify an environment, protect against evil, or reaffirm their faith, salt continues to be a vital part of spiritual life. How do you use salt in your daily spiritual practice? Share your experiences and help spread the knowledge about the power of salt. Remember that salt, in its simplicity, continues to be a powerful symbol of the covenant between God and His people, a heritage that we must cherish and use wisely. Spiritual healing through salt is not limited to biblical practice. In many Christian traditions, salt is used in healing rituals to ward off evil and restore spiritual balance. Have you participated in a healing ritual where salt was used? These rituals remind us that salt is more than just a seasoning. It is a powerful tool and be used to bring healing and restoration to both body and soul. If you are facing spiritual or physical challenges, consider using salt as part of your healing practice. Consecrate the salt to God and use it in your prayers and healing rituals, trusting that He will bring restoration and renewal to your life. Salt in its simplicity continues to be a powerful tool in the hands of those who have faith. Use it with reverence and wisdom, and be prepared to witness healing and restoration in your spiritual life. Jesus called us to be the salt of the earth, and this means living in a way that reflects God's holiness, purity, and justice. Salt, in its simplicity, is a powerful symbol of our covenant with God and a reminder of our responsibility to preserve faith and justice in a corrupt world. Are you living as the salt of the earth in your daily life? If so, continue to use salt in your spiritual practices, knowing that each grain of salt represents God's presence in your life. Salt is not just a physical element, it is a symbol of our faith and a powerful spiritual tool. Whether to purify, protect, or heal, salt plays a vital role in our spiritual life. Share in the comments how you use salt in your spiritual life and inspire others to do the same. The power of salt is a reflection of God's power, and when used with faith, it can bring great blessings and spiritual victories. Do not underestimate the power of salt. Use it with reverence, faith, and purpose, knowing that God can work in powerful ways through His creations. By consecrating and using salt in your spiritual practices, you are utilizing a powerful tool that God has made available to you. May God bless you and your family, and may the salt of the earth continue to be a source of strength and protection in your life. Amen.